You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. A lot of big news to get to, and I'm going to go completely out of order in the show to bring you the latest on what we know regarding possible U.S. involvement moving forward in the Israel-Iran situation. So about an hour and a half ago, the Wall Street Journal reported an exclusive, quote, President Trump told senior aides he approved attack plans for Iran, but is holding off on giving the final order to see if Tehran will abandon its nuclear program. And then, exactly 40 minutes later, per the New York Times, quote, Iran would accept President Trump's offer to meet soon, end quote. That's a New York Times journalist citing an Iranian official from the foreign ministry. So I'm not going to speculate just yet. That's the latest bit of news because I'm not trying to keep you guys in suspense for views and subscribers, or if you're listening on the radio, there you go. That's the latest that we know on that situation. Maybe more develops. Maybe Elizabeth Mitchell, our White House correspondent, gives myself or board operator Allison a call. We will let you know. That said, to the latest news this morning, the Supreme Court delivered a very important decision. Essentially, 6-3, conservatives sided against the very, very brave, wise, historic justices. Essentially, they upheld that Tennessee could, in fact, enforce a ban on gender-affirming care, otherwise known as transgender medication and experimentation on minors. If a state passes any kind of a law which bans a minor from being experimented on, and again, I call these experiments because we do not have any of the long-term effect data on messing around with the endocrine system of minors. We don't. Again, for individuals who are going through menopause in the United States, otherwise known as women going through menopause in the United States, certain kinds, not all. Again, I know that a couple years ago, there was a suggestion that all menopausal hormonal treatments caused a cancer risk, and that's been debunked. Certain kinds of hormonal medicines and treatments in women going through menopause can, in fact, raise a risk of cancer in certain organs, specifically around the ovaries. And therefore, there is a carcinogenic risk that comes with messing with your hormones. And that actually comes with really any hormonal medication to a degree. You do increase your chances of getting cancer by a factor of 2 or 3 because we really don't know what we're doing with the endocrine system. Now, I, as a former anatomy and physiology teacher, producer Nick with his biomed degree, we've looked at this quite a bit. Not a settled science whatsoever. It's not. You are playing with fire. And so when you bring minors into the equation, and as I said on a media hit earlier today, if you have a situation in which a child breaks a kneecap, it's really a worse situation than when an adult breaks a kneecap because you can hurt development, things that are supposed to be developing along a certain way. So in the case of transgender treatments and experiments on children, given that the rest of the Western world has appropriately looked at studies showing it is harmful for kids, not to mention the sterilization and not actually decreasing the risk of suicide and a lot of horrible things that come along with creating either increasing an individual's carcinogen intake through hormonal treatments or permanent sterilization and permanent wound opening for all this other kind of stuff. Maybe it's not a good thing, in fact, that children are forced to be allowed this, whether parents, whether doctors say yes or no. So that brings us to that particular decision. It was authored, the affirmative, by Justice Roberts. And what I want to point out, though, is essentially the dissent led by Sotomayor, who says, quote, Tennessee's ban applies no matter what the minor's parents and doctors think, with no regard for the severity of the minor's mental health conditions or the extent to which treatment is medically necessary for an individual child. I hate to tell you this, but this is in fact an important piece of paper from the Supreme Court because it recognizes a state's right to ban dangerous procedures for minors. There is no mental health procedure out there that would suggest cutting off healthy organs is a good thing. None. if you have schizophrenia, if you have body dysmorphia, if you think that you're too fat and therefore, you should be anorexic or bulimic, you fall into that horrible, horrible illness, then a doctor affirming you and telling you, just keep on keeping on, you're doing really good, yeah, we'll lop off a couple things for you, is a very, very, very bad thing. Again, just because a child says they want to smoke a pack of Marlboros doesn't mean you slide one out and light it up for them. So, that said, the media's response to this was about as you would expect, which was tipping things over and yelling and screaming into pillows. So over on Blue Sky, which is the left's little haven away from Twitter, which is slowly dying, you immediately had responses from individuals on the platform saying, quote, protect trans kids, kill a Supreme Court justice, end quote. And then suggesting fascism has only ever been dismantled through violence. I'm tired of pretending there's a high ground to take. These animals cannot be reasoned with, and I have no patience or empathy for them. I wish nothing but the absolute worst for every transphobic Nazi piece of bleep. And this is by an individual named Pixel. Their bio says, woof woof, here we go again. So it's a furry. Ugh. I'm Pixie, she/they, 32 years old. And then essentially they say they draw porn. So just as a quick reminder for all of you out there, we told you this was coming. We told you very explicitly this was coming. I made this prediction years ago when I was back in the education system. When you tell children every single day through all of these liberal cat lady teachers, and I want to make that specific, it is almost always either young single elementary teachers, young male teachers who are almost always also single, or very old, very to the left teachers in kind of the soft subjects and sciences. Those individuals have told kids on and on and on and on and on again for the last couple of years, really the last couple of decades, depending on where you're at, that they are under a severe threat of Nazi fascism and that they are going to die because they are not affirmed in their latest transgender change. And therefore, the only way out of, again, if you are told every day you are going to die, eventually you're going to have people who try to rise up and fight back, which has led to the assassination by Luigi Mangione in New York City, the Washington, D.C. assassination of the two young individuals, the Boulder, Colorado firebombing of women and children, the Los Angeles riots, the targeting of stores and the BLM riots of George Floyd, etc. And that's going to continue because right now the Democrats just tut-tut it and the media tut-tuts it. From the Associated Press, quote, the Supreme Court upholds a Tennessee ban on gender-affirming care. Again, it's always gender-affirming care. The language that is used is a clear example of bias. Again, when they call open riots mostly peaceful protests, they chose to use the words that they used. Because when I'm writing an article, especially when I'm writing a news or an analysis piece instead of just straight commentary, I am very, very careful about the words that I use because they will be cited by local and state level leaders, perhaps congressmen and women. It matters what words, as a journalist, you do and do not write. It's why, thank God, I don't claim to be a journalist. But this is the catch. They say, affirming care for transgender minors in a huge setback for transgender rights. No rights have been taken away. You do not have a right to mutilate a child. You don't. You as a parent do not have a right to hand your child a beer or a cigarette. You don't. Even if you believe that's the best course of action for them. Your rights end when objective harm comes to the child. You can't swing a plumbing pipe at a child. You can't. No matter how, if there's an article in Vogue that says, well, actually, smacking your child with a lead pipe can be an emotional learning experience. No. And Vance, our vice president, then went on Blue Sky to talk about this, and things got a little bit funny. We're going to talk about that and much more in the breaking news, including the Democrat response to everything. Radio crew, though, we have to send you over to commercial. We'll continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. All right, live stream crew. Vice President J.D. Vance. He decided to do a little bit of the old trolling in response to this and says, I've just set up my page on Blue Sky. Hope to see you guys there. We all knew how this was going to turn out. So immediately says, hello, Blue Sky. I've been told this app has become the place to go for common sense. Sorry, I'm Mimicking J.D. Vance, I might as well look like him. For common sense political discussion and analysis. So I'm thrilled to be here to engage with all of you. He then quotes a large part of Clarence Thomas' opinion in this particular Supreme Court case, which again, Clarence Thomas is fantastic. There should be a statue of Clarence Thomas in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. He is an American hero. Then he also says, to that end, I found Justice Thomas's concurrence on medical care for transgender youth quite illuminating. He argues that many of our so-called experts have used bad arguments and substandard science to push experimental therapies on our youth. That is objectively true. Again, the New York Times suppressed real objective scientific study that showed how harmful transgender hormonal treatments and surgeries are on minors and also adults in general, but on minors, because groups like the Trevor Project and other left-wing advocacy groups were terrified of the idea that someone might get out there and say objectively they're wrong if they want to sterilize children. He says, quote, I might add that many of those scientists are receiving substantial resources from Big Pharma to push these medicines on your kids. What do you think? To which immediately Vice President Vance's account was suspended on Blue Sky. So, fantastic. Now, Blue Sky has since, at least according to one of our news partners over on X, he has now been reinstated account-wise. The left has no idea whatsoever how to side on issues, whether or not there's science. Now, remember, I was told, trust the science. The science, guys, that's going to get us through everything. And then some of us out there in the science community started saying things like, hey, the science on this is not settled. There's a lot of problems with this data. It has not gone through the standard FDA long-term effect testing that certain drugs, in fact, almost all drugs that enter the realm of legal consumption in the United States go through. Maybe we should wait a second here, because what we're seeing on the other side of the trans hormonal treatment things is like the same percentage of suicides, 50%. So what's going on? Also, again, you had the detransitioners. My friend and colleague Mary Margaret Olahan has an excellent book called Detrans on this particular subject. Tyler O'Neill over at the Daily Signal has written extensively about groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has gone after groups questioning, just simply asking whether or not children should be exposed to this kind of stuff. And the left is just desperate to cling to this. They have to make it their only thing. And the DNC, with all of their special gender and race rules for their elections, making this weird pseudo-Brownian, sluggish amoeba of a movement that somehow ties to try this LGBTQ plus 2IA nightmare to the pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, pro-Iran, whatever, radical Islamic terror, to the socialist and Marxist views of economic redistributionism. And it is, in fact, I know, this is going to shock many of you out there, according to every available poll right now, not working whatsoever. Democrats are further underwater on the transgender issue than they have ever been in American politics, which means since we've started polling on these issues. Additionally, they are underwater on illegal immigration and how Trump is handling this kind of a thing. And to make matters worse, they're running the furthest to the left candidates that they can possibly think of. Or maybe that's for the best, because what we're going to talk about up next is Maxwell Frost, Bernie Sanders' wonder kid that's not AOC, and then, of course, Zoran Mondami from New York City. So we got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Bum, 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 I ran. Bum, 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 I ran.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
So before we get to our conversation, just you, me, and the floorboards, about... Let's get this song down. Sorry, a little Beach Boys Bomb Iran stuff. I couldn't help it. The meme was right there in front of me. Before we get to our conversation about Maxwell Frost and Zoran Mamdani and how the left is again, pulling an Aaron Bushnell and setting themselves on fire in front of the entire country to try to prove something, I guess. We've got to talk a little bit about some of the updates regarding the Israel-Iran situation, some of the polling behind it. The media is losing their minds. And the media is losing their minds over this. There are two groups in the country right now that are having an existential crisis. And I'm using the precise words there for a reason. Existential crisis. Right now, you have the media who is fuming because they no longer have reliable insight into what's going on in the Trump administration. On the other side, you have this hyper-isolationist crew who is also out in front of everyone on social media, losing it because they no longer have the access and the inroads to the Trump administration that they once enjoyed. So essentially, you have two groups who are looking inside. You have the media on the left looking in, and then you have the hyper-isolationist crew and also Bernie Sanders and AOC, it's a very, very weird alliance today, looking in from the other window. And then in the inside is Trump, and he's just kind of sitting back and he's smiling because he is currently holding all of the cards. So we'll tackle this in reverse order. First of all, there has been a rumor that has been perpetuated online over the last couple of days that the Republican Party is split like right down the middle, and that there's actually a vast majority, a huge swaths of Republican voters out there who say that Trump should stay completely away from Iran. He should not be worried about any kind of a nuclear program with Iran, that essentially he should be willing to give Iran whatever they want through diplomacy, if at all costs, to avoid any planes flying over Iran. That's been the rumor that has been perpetuated quite constantly. And that's just not true. It's just not true. There is one Morning Consult poll that suggests that a large group of Republicans are not in favor of Trump getting into direct open war with Iran. But the way that the question is worded in this particular poll is essentially, are you a fan of Donald Trump going to war with Iran? That's a rather loaded pollster question, by the way. That's very poorly asked. That's not how you do that. Pollsters that, in fact, ask questions in a way that doesn't essentially channel a specific outcome, from the Gray House over to an exclusive from the New York Post, to the Ronald Reagan Institute, to Fox News poll, to CNN, all show that right now, we'll start with the Gray House on June 15th, said, do you support the U.S. attacking Iran if necessary? And this was just to people who claim to have voted for Donald Trump in 2024. 72% said yes. 19% said no. And then there's a small margin of individuals who say they're unsure. According to just this afternoon from J&L Partners, conducted on June 16th and 17th, a margin of error of about 3.9%, 65% of, quote, MAGA Republicans would back strikes on Iran compared to the 19% opposed. By the way, according to standard polls, this eclipses the support for military action among even the more traditional Republican groups. By contrast, the self-described traditional Republicans would back strikes against Iran 51 to 28%. Now, according to another poll, would you support or oppose the United States launching its own strikes on Iranian military installations and key infrastructure? 58% say they support it, 25% say they oppose it, 17% of the Republicans say they are neutral or unsure. According to the Ronald Reagan Institute, 60% of Republicans support the strikes, 27% oppose, 32% of Democrats support, 51% oppose, and the independents are split pretty much down the line. 35% support, 33% oppose, the rest are unsure. Now, there is another clip from Harry Ensign, but before we even get started on that particular conversation, it is important to remember sometimes there are arguments that occur online. You say, how do you know this? I'm going to tell you how I know this. A lot of my contemporaries, many of whom are very good friends of mine, they are conservative pundits, a lot of them young influencers, and at some point we get to thinking that we're pretty hot stuff. You know, I've got a lot of followers on Twitter. I've got some followers on Instagram. A lot of people come and watch my YouTube show. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run for Congress because, man, look at how many people are tuning into the show. Certainly I, the great Tony Kinnett, could easily just, walk right through the House 6th district here in Indiana where the show's broadcast from. And I could just, boot any old Republican out of the way. I could win any primary. And the last couple of elections that's been tried, the answer has been absolutely the freaking not. Nope. They get really roughly stomped, in fact. Some of my colleagues, who again, I'm not going to name, in particular Republican primaries around the country, got skunked because outside of social media, no one knew who they were at all. None. And by the way, that kind of humility check is in fact important, which again is one of the reasons why I try not to pretend that I'm something special, because in all God's honest truth, I'm not. And for all of the yelling and the preening from online influencers right now, from individuals who, many of whom, though I respect, are saying, oh, Trump's done it this time. He's going to split the Republican Party. He's going to doom Republicans forever. Oh, no. I heard the same thing from the Bushians in 2016. Oh, Donald Trump's going to come in and wreck everything. No one's ever going to vote Republican again. Oh, no. We hear this like every 2 weeks, and it just doesn't turn out to be true. Now, that said, here is Harry Enton over from CNN, whom a lot of individuals, by the way, were praising not too long ago, talking about this specific thing. Just, I believe this is either from late last night or early this morning. Harry Enton on the Republican support or lack of support for the Iranian situation.
And overall, I feel like there's more support for Donald Trump's positions than is comically acknowledged. Oppose Iran getting a nuclear weapon. I mean, look at this. 79% of adults agree on that. They agree with Donald Trump. Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. 83% of Republicans, 79% of independents, 79% of Democrats. When you get 79% of Democrats and 83% of Republicans agreeing on anything, you know that that position is the very clear majority in this country. And so the American public is with Donald Trump. They definitely oppose Iran getting nuclear weapons.
So this is a nuance here, but, Trump and Netanyahu both arguing that Iran is close to being capable of making a nuclear weapon. If that is the case, what is the feeling of Americans as to whether the United States should get involved in this conflict?
Right. If you buy Donald Trump's theory of the case, and I think that's important to note, this is polling from April. If Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at this. Overall, you get the slight plurality. I mean, it's within the margin of error, but the slight plurality of Americans actually favor U.S. airstrikes compared to 47% opposing it. Now, here's the other nugget I'll note, right? There's been a lot of talk online and on social media and in podcasts of a divide within the Republican ranks. But here on this question, if Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at that. 69% of Republicans, the clear vast majority of Republicans, favor U.S. airstrikes on Iran, on their nuclear facilities. But there is this substantial minority, 27%, who oppose such an idea.
Okay, so before the comments begin, am I voicing my support for anything at all? No, I'm not voicing my support for anything whatsoever. Right now, I believe that President Trump knows what he's doing. And the reason I believe that is because, to quote the greatest Midwestern phrase of all time, scoreboard. The President of the United States, historically, has a very, very good record when it comes to Middle Eastern policy and genuine, non-fettered peace through strength. The President of the United States, right now, has a very good record on that. I'm going to let him cook. Again, we'll talk about that in just a little bit here with Daniel Flesch, but I want to talk very, very briefly about the vast, vast, vast majority of punditry going on. So, as a pundit, weighing in on other pundits, I am very aware that bias could play a very key role. And that though there are a lot of my friends on the isolationist side, on the interventionist side, who are currently going at each other, there are some things that some are saying that are just objectively foolish. Lindsey Graham getting out in front of the country and calling for the most intense thing that he can at the moment is unhelpful. Now, no one's really listening to Lindsey Graham, but he is in fact starting to call for some of the things that you should not be calling for, like boots on the ground in Iran, which is silly. Now, on the other side of things, Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, has been on the show before, and Tucker Carlson, a friend, had got into quite the debate. And Tucker had teased this last night. Oh, sorry. Radio crew, we got to send you over to commercial. Sorry about that. Don't want to get in trouble with the FCC. We'll be back in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. Sorry about that. So Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson announced they were going to do a bit of a show together. They were going to debate this whole thing. And Tucker Carlson posted a small clip announcing that this would be coming today. Here is what that looked like.
How many people live in Iran, by the way? I don't know the population. At all? No, I don't know the population. You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah.
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is that relevant?
Because if you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and predominantly Shia. Okay, this is cute.
It's not
okay.
even... You don't know anything about Iran, so
okay,
actually
I am not the tuck.
Okay, so I've got a couple of problems with this. First of all, to be clear, on Ted Cruz's side, it is a bad look for a senior politician not to know basic facts about an issue that he has a strongly held position on. But to be clear, I've had a problem with this kind of political interviewing for a very long time. Gotcha questioning, the Margaret Brennan style of political interviews, is a very cheap form of interviewing. To be clear, the leading with of the country you want to topple, of the thing you want to do, how could you not know that? And the immediate pearl clutching. And the suggestion, oh, how could you not know this thing about it? It's Margaret Brennan style stuff. It is not, in fact, at all useful or helpful in any way, shape, or form to any kind of a conversation. Go, you don't know the pie charts? I mean, how could you not know the Ayatollah's favorite color, Ted? My goodness. Stop it. It's not useful. That's not actually an effective debate. And I say that as, again, I have colleagues on the Daily Signal staff whom we disagree with this stuff on. And we've had some really great conversations about it. May have a kind of an open panel in the future for your guys kind of about this, between the more interventionist and the more isolationist. Those are great conversations to have. But gotcha style journalism with the intent just to go out and embarrass, or to go out and say, see, you're dumb because you don't know if it's 89 million or 91 million. Okay. I mean, that doesn't change the fact that Iran does, in fact, according not to war hawks, but people like Tulsi Gabbard, have testified in Congress that Iran was, in fact, enriching uranium to the point of seeking nuclear weapons. And that is, in fact, a very direct threat to the United States. UN crews do not like Israel at all, do, in fact, like Iran a lot, have said some of the same things. And I'm not going to play a lot of the rest of the clips from the interview, which, again, was really just arguing for like an hour and 50 minutes. I will point out there was a lot of just stuff that said that was objectively not true, that I do feel compelled to report because it is, in fact, a big piece of news. Tucker makes the claim that like Iran actually hasn't made any assassination attempts on Donald Trump. That's just not true.
But I just want to pull that thread because it's so important. I voted for Donald Trump. I campaigned for Donald Trump. Yeah. He's our president. And we're on the cusp of a war. So if there's evidence that Iran paid hitmen to kill Donald Trump and is currently doing that, where is that? Like, what are you even talking? I've never heard that before.
That's just, I'm sorry. No. There are two individuals from Iran who have direct ties to the IRGC who are currently in federal custody right now. You don't have to do that. If you want to be isolationist on this, fine. Great. You have every right to do so. If you think that this might draw America into a regional war, I think that you can make a case for that, even if I don't necessarily agree with the case that you're making. But simply going out and saying anyone who disagrees with you is somehow John McCain risen from the grave, seeking to kill us all on boots on the ground on Iran, is passionate. It's just silly. Everyone who disagrees with me is stupid is a really sad way to run an argument. And to be honest, a better is deserved. We'll be back in just a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
All right, welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. So the media is just not having a good time. The pundits on the other side of the aisle are also struggling quite consistently. One of the Pod Save America bros, one of the individuals, by the way, who in the Obama administration effectively gave Iran a green light to do whatever they wanted. Tommy Vietor specifically said, well, the president of the United States can't say bleep like this, referencing Trump's statements about unconditional surrender and that just like Soleimani, we know where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. And then pretend we're not an active participant in this war. Ilhan Omar, the same thing. No one is attacking or has attacked Americans. That's not true. It is time to stop dragging Americans into war and letting Israel once again get America involved in their chosen war. Okay, I'm sorry. No, that's just not the case. The idea that the United States is simply doing whatever Israel wants to do on the chain. I am reminded constantly of news headlines that come out about once a week. President so-and-so said this, said no to Israel on this, said no to Israel on this, said no to Netanyahu on this, said no here. I'm just not seeing it. I'm just not buying it. Additionally, it is a little rich for some of the crew on the left to suggest that Donald Trump is an evil, terrible, stinky, stupid person because as of this moment, Trump has effectively organized and orchestrated an extremely popular thing, which is major attacks on the Iranian military and nuclear infrastructure without any military flights over Iran from the United States, without any boots on the ground, without any directive offensive action at this point from the U.S. That is a masterstroke of diplomacy. And the real reason they're mad about this is because Trump holds the cards. Because Donald Trump in front of the country right now is like, I might do it, I might not, you don't know. And some have said, well, that's just really reckless. How can Trump just be so reckless that he just doesn't tell us what's going on? Oh, you mean like Joe Biden, who would announce when we were going to retaliate against an attack on American soldiers like 72 hours in advance so that the perpetrators could leave the area? Or when Barack Obama would telegraph his punches to the T? Oh, I'm so sorry that we have a president who actually, in this case, unlike some of his comments regarding Canada, is taking foreign policy exceptionally serious. He's taking it seriously in this instance. And so you have people from CNN that are trying to press him, well, why don't you want a ceasefire? Why don't you? How could you do this, Mr. President? And he's not even giving them the attention that they think they deserve. This is from the White House today.
The U.S. response to
who you with?
CNN. There's a split.
Fake news. Fortunately, nobody watches.
But my question
is anybody watching CNN nowadays? I haven't seen it in a long time.
But some of your supporters are wary of the U.S. getting involved in another foreign wall. And
I love that. Some of these reporters are wary of, not the American people, not according to polling, not objective questioning. Again, the immediate CNN pearl clutching over the press. Oh, these reporters next to me, they want to know. Why do they want to know? Well, because during the first Trump administration, there were many individuals inside the FBI and the entire DOJ, for that matter, in the Pentagon, and throughout every federal agency, period, that would leak things to the Washington Post, that would leak things to the New York Times, that would leak things to Politico, that would leak things to the New York Post, that would leak things to the Los Angeles Times, that would leak things to CNN and MSNBC, and on and on and on and on. And the Trump administration is kind of tired of that because it's hard to actually gauge foreign policy maneuvers if everyone is already reacting to your plan before it has even been set into motion. Because essentially everyone is playing Monday morning quarterback on Friday. So everyone is saying, oh, I know the outcome of this. Oh, I know what's going to happen. We're going to have World War III. Oh, everyone's going to die. Oh, this is going to be a huge, terrible thing. Oh, Putin's going to get involved. Oh, no, you don't know. In fact, it is probably one of the most important lessons Americans need to learn. You spend all of your time before the election researching the candidates so that once they are your representative, they make the decisions you want to. This idea that American society has gotten so lazy that they don't really care about the election, it's only afterward that they start getting mad about representatives, whether it's in the executive branch, the legislative branch, or who's appointed to the judicial branch. And there's this angst, this aggravation that always fades out by the time we get to election season, and then it's the most lackluster primary in existence that no one comes out for, like the New York City Democratic primary. That is, in fact, happening less than a week from today. These things matter. And they matter a lot. And the reason that they matter a lot is because some of the candidates that are up for election are the left's craziest people that they can cough up. So as a reminder, one of the absolute huge winners that the left has coughed up is Zoran Mamdani, a New York assemblyman who is currently running as one of the Democrat candidates for New York City mayor. Now, he's an open communist who has, said things like, oh, the phrase globalize the intifada, the call for terrorism around the world. Oh, it's actually like a really good thing.
I am someone who I would say am less comfortable with the idea of banning the use of certain words, and that I think it is more evocative of a Trump-style approach to how to lead a country. And I think especially when we've seen...
Sure, but like, does that just make you uncomfortable? Like the phrase globalized intifada from the river to the sea, does that make you uncomfortable? Or do you think...
Okay, those are different. Those are super different.
They're not
those are
really.
like different genres.
I'm sorry, I'm asking Zoran. Then they're not really different to me. And to some people, they're not different.
You know, I know people for whom those things mean very different things. And to me, ultimately, what I hear in so many is a desperate desire for equality. And
yeah, desperate desire for, it's all, I love it. I don't hear, when they say kill the Boer in South Africa, they don't actually mean kill the Boer. They mean like, separate ourselves from the chains of the machine, man. I listened to this Leonard Skinner record backwards, and it told me how to make a waffle. Like, get out of here. Stop. Oh, to me, I mean, get that Oprah Winfrey, that's my truth garbage. Festering nonsense. Which, by the way, the media has just gone so far up their own butts over this particular issue that you had Whoopi Goldberg and her infinite wisdom today making the case that black people in the United States have it just as bad as the people in Iran who are currently being beaten and hanged.
And it's slow.
But let's just remember, too, the Iranians literally throw gay people off of buildings. They don't adhere to basic human rights.
Listen, here's the thing. Let's not do that. Let's not do that.
Let's not mention the definitive clear news from the oppressive Shia regime that is beating women openly, that is hanging people openly. Like, oh God, don't mention objective facts. Whoopi Goldberg has to get back to her ghost stories about these magical, mythical lynching packs that are apparently running around America for black people. Jussie Smollett told me so.
Because if we start with that, we have been known in this country to tie gay folks to the car.
Yes, because if you say Iran is currently hanging gay people from cranes, that will cause some people in America to tie gay people to cars. Or maybe she's making an equivalence point. We've been just as bad. No, honey, no.
Hey, I'm sorry, but where the Iranian regime is today in 2025 is nothing compared to the United States.
Hanging black people. So
it is not even the same. I couldn't step.
See, we're the same. We're the same as Iran because, see, there was a time in this country where black people were lynched. Oh, that's the same. Again, the absolute stupidity. And you've seen this also from kind of the populist right as well. There's a guy on X named like Jason Whitlock, some kind of a influencer, who suggested that because the abortion is legal in parts of the United States, that we don't have the moral authority or high ground to criticize the Iranian regime. No, that's not how that works. Because I'm not over here saying abortion is okay and Iran's beating of women and hanging of people is not okay. That's not how the moral high ground works. I'm sorry. That's just not how we're a representative republic in which laws are passed based on specific votes and constitutional arguments. It's not as though everyone collectively on November 6th got together and voted yes or no on a nationwide massive mob rule abortion question. That's not how that works. You know, guys like the Hodge twins, who were saying, oh, Nick Fuentes, the gay Hispanic white nationalist. He was actually right about everything all along because, see, this is actually a master plot by Trump and the Jews. And my God, you don't have to be ridiculous. But if you want to know why the majority of the country is sick to their stomachs of the far left and then kind of the goobering grifting over on the right side of the aisle, this would be why. This would be why. Because it's just constant boogeymen all the time. People are not here for that, even if the Democrats are going to run those people. Radio crew will let you guys head over to the commercial break. We'll bring you back in a second for some updates from the ground. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. There is one other thing from this Mondami guy that I want to share with you. And then, of course, Bernie Sanders, his prodigy, Maxwell Frost. He went up at Coachella and he said, this is Maxwell Frost, my beloved. He is a very young man and a socialist. He's very wonderful. And the Maxwell Frost, the brilliant Democrat young representative, he, in his infinite wisdom, has, I guess, got up in front of the country and said that realistically, all illegal immigrants in this country need to be given full legal citizenship just right away.
And to my Republican colleagues who say, I don't want any undocumented people in this country, I actually agree with you. So let's document every single one of them with a speedy path to citizenship. That's how we fix this problem.
Actually, there is a legal path to citizenship. It's called coming into this country legally. I know.
Oh, there's a big surprise. That's an incredible. I think I'm going to have a heart attack and die from that surprise.
It is hilarious to watch the left say, well, then let's just legalize everyone. Again, remember during the election cycle, how Republicans campaigned saying the left has individuals that want to just grant blanket amnesty to everyone. And the media pundits said, no, that's not true. How could you? No one's saying this. You're just, all that. And then here you go. Clear example. Now, this Mamdani guy over in New York City is currently only 10 points behind Cuomo in the Democratic polls right now, which is wild. And depending on whether or not New York Democrats come out to vote on Election Day, here again, 6 days away, could in fact put a Democrat openly avowed communist in charge of the largest city in the United States. Now, of course, he's already trying to cry tears saying that since he's said all that globalize the intifada stuff, people have been mean and really horrible. So he's come out saying he's gotten threats that she totally got it. He promises.
I get messages that say the only good Muslim is a dead Muslim. I get threats on my life. On the people that I love. And I try not to talk.
Gotta love the fake tears there.
I'm sorry, I can't go on. That's okay. Your tears say more than real evidence ever could.
Love it. I just love it. And by the way, it is interesting to say that though he has openly on the record said he wants to defund the NYPD, remove billions of dollars from the NYPD's budget, he is also at the same time now just hired a bunch of private security because, for me and not for thee. So the Democrats are running their worst people. In this case, a communist former rapper who's never held down a real job. To be fair, that's better than Tim Walz, who is just a communist who had never really done a real amount of work. He was a teacher at one point who said he was friends with school shooters, but fantastic. All right, we're going to head away very briefly, and then we're going to come back and talk to Daniel Flesch over from the Heritage Foundation. Some really great stuff on what's actually in Americans' best interest in this Israel-Iran conflict. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here at the Daily Signal. Cutting over to Daniel Flesch. He's Senior Policy Analyst for the Middle East and North Africa over at the Heritage Foundation. Daniel, you've had a wild couple of days, wouldn't you say?
Most certainly. It's been a great week.
So I'm hearing every single rumor but the kitchen sink at this point, and we could get into all of the various rumors. I've got a couple of on-the-ground kind of reporter-style questions that I want to ask you because I think these are what our audience have asked most constantly. What do you believe, based on the evidence that we've got, is the actual status and strength of the regime in Iran currently?
Well, that was a different question on Thursday evening than it is today. And so what we're seeing right now is the IDF has put out estimates that they've destroyed about 35 to 40% of the missile launchers. So there's kind of a multifold attack that's been going on since Thursday evening on the part of Israel. They've been targeting numerous sites, 4 or 5 primary ones, which is the regime's ballistic missile production capacity, their assembly lines, the missiles themselves, and the launchers, in addition to the nuclear sites, because there's a bottleneck. You could produce the missiles, but if you have nothing to launch them, then they're effectively hunks of metal that are just on the ground. So Israel's been destroying those launchers pretty systematically. So Iran's capacity to launch missiles is significantly reduced, and you see that by the first salvo that Iran responded with back last Friday or Saturday was about 100 missiles. And just last night, it was 2 salvos of about 12 or 15 missiles because they have to ration and marshal their resources. Depends how long this campaign will last.
That's the kind of estimate that we had provided on the show. Again, noticing the dwindling responses in sorties or flights, whatever we're calling a series of ballistic missile launches these days. The drones, they're also starting to ration a little bit. That may be because of a shortage of supply. And it also may be because I believe at this point, not one drone has found its target. But alas, that's kind of the military capacity, the strength of the regime, right? With all of the people in Iran, with the strength of this theological regime that has beat women, that has created for lack of a better term, a hell on earth for a lot of certain denominations of Muslims, of Christians inside Iran over the last couple of decades. How, again, based on the intelligence that we have, how is that holding up at present?
Their grip is still very strong. There's a lot of pressure being brought to bear on them. Israel, another target package I didn't mention, but Israel's been going after some of the leading scientists who've been developing the nuclear program, and also some of the high military figures that are part of command and control. That's what they did really in the first night, in an impressive simultaneous operation. And there's obviously the pressure that the president himself is bringing to bear on the Ayatollah, saying unconditional surrender, saying we know where you are. We're not going to kill you just yet, but we know where you are. But that does not mean that the Iranian people are free from the clutches of the regime just yet. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is the army that the regime created for the sole purpose of protecting the regime. Not the Ayatollah in particular, but the regime itself. There's no indications just yet, and we're talking to people to find out that's true or not. There's no indications just yet that they have relinquish any sort of control, or even at lower levels, that there's any sort of uncertainty in the veracity or the strength of their cause. Until we start to see cracks like that, we probably won't see the Iranian people take operations into their own hands. We can certainly hope and try to supply them with support if that's the case. But right now, the regime still seems to be holding strong. Of course, that could change any moment.
So this is one of the things that we get into this conversation. I've heard the words regime change more times, perhaps, than I would care to admit in the last week. And there's a very severe disconnect between what people who have been in the Middle East know and understand about cultures and about you think the Balkans are bad. My goodness, you talk about regimes and how they set themselves up to resist crumbling. You talk about the kind of things that are in place, the IRGC, which points inward as much as it does outward oftentimes. We can talk about all of those things. In the United States, though, I'm hearing regime change be thrown around, I won't say casually, but with a lot more in the way that I believe I had heard the Bay of Pigs talked about in American newspapers before the Bay of Pigs disaster actually took place. And by the way, this isn't a criticism of anyone at all. I think that both sides, the isolationists and the interventionists, on the extreme ends of both of those groups, have castigated the other as being completely for regime change and a forever war and all of these other, blankety blanks. The other crew has suggested that, well, maybe a regime change does need to be the final approach for this, because otherwise there may always be pursuits. What do you see as being kind of the practical options at play right now? I just want, from someone who understands the region as well as you do, what's practical here?
Yeah, let me say from the outset, I understand why this conversation of regime change is being brought up, because people look back the last 20, 25 years of American foreign policy in the Middle East, and they see that nation building, regime change were kind of these slogans that were thrown around as relates to Iraq and Afghanistan, not improperly. But it's a different situation here. For one thing, the president hasn't said our objective is regime change. He has said our objective is to ensure that Iran does not have nuclear capacity, nuclear weapons.
In fact, that's one of the main points that Trump has been so consistent on. Again, pointing out that Steve Guest video where he assembled 16 minutes of footage over the last at least a decade, perhaps more, where Trump has said consistently, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, no ifs, ands, buts, or coconuts.
Right, exactly. And actually, every president since Clinton has said Iran will not develop nuclear weapons on their watch. And for the Israelis also, they have not said their objectives regime change. They've a few different objectives, but all told, it's essentially to make sure that Iran cannot pose an existential threat to Israel. And for that matter, regime change does not have to be a part of it. It's just the Ayatollahs to give up their genocidal campaign against Israel, give up their ambition for nuclear weapons, and not start producing ballistic missiles that would threaten Israel. So from the American perspective, all those things can be attainable without regime change. But we also must recognize that this regime is inherently A, evil, and B, antithetical to the United States and to the West and to Israel. And so if they cannot change, if they will not change course, then right now they're going down a path which regime change might be an end state, but it's certainly not the objective now, and it doesn't have to be the objective.
And to make this explicitly clear, I will not, to the best of my ability, I don't want to shy away from this conversation, not because there's a way that I do pull or that I don't pull, but I really think that right now, with this broad, ideologically diverse coalition on the right that includes everyone from kind of Clintonian blue collar kind of union guys who were abandoned all the way over to your dispensational Baptists in the South, all the way over to your more moderate Republicans on the coasts and everyone in between. I really do want to see good dialogue brought out through here.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm thankful, again, not just for the work that the Heritage Foundation is consistently doing. I know that Victoria Coates, Rob Greenway, and of course, you as well. You guys have been working overtime since this issue came out. I know I've been privy to a couple of those DM groups. But when we're looking at a conversation like this moving forward, how do we encourage the on-the-ground stuff instead of the hypothesizing and conspirizing, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I think let's start from first principles. What are America's national security objectives in the Middle East, broadly speaking? And the first one is ensuring the free flow of energy out of the region, not for our consumption. Thank goodness under President Trump, this administration and his previous one, we are energy independent, but for the world's consumption, which is important to us. Secondly, is
because we end up buying the trade, right, that is built on the back of that other energy. Yes,
very much so. And we want to make sure that OPEC Plus and others do not have a monopoly or do not dictate the markets there. Second,
precisely, well said.
Yeah. Second is free flow of commerce through the region. And this is why you saw during the Signal chat that was leaked why Vice President Vance said that transit through the Suez Canal is really a European problem. And he's not wrong. But it's important for us to ensure as a global superpower, the free flow of the commons. And then beyond that, also making sure the Middle East is not a staging ground for terrorist activity or for threats against the United States. Iran, unfortunately, poses a threat to all four elements of that. So again, it is an enemy of the United States. It has made itself an enemy of the United States for 46 years, ever since it held over 50 Americans hostage in the embassy in 1979. Now, so that should start we should all be on the same page about that, recognizing the threat that Iran poses to the United States, to our interests in the region, and to our allies, including Israel. And from there, the question is, okay, what do you do about it? And what is the threat they pose? And they've posed a threefold threat predominantly. One is their nuclear, their pursuit of nuclear capability. Two is their production and their ballistic missile arsenal they have. And three is their proxy network. Well, thankfully, Israel, since October 7th, has basically rolled back that proxy network. It has now destroyed its ballistic missile capacity back in launches, strikes in October and more recently. But its nuclear program still remains. And if Iran is able to develop nuclear capacity, there's no reason to believe it will not use it against Israel, potentially against Europe or the United States longer term. It's trying to develop the missiles to carry it to the United States. So Iran is a threat and a danger to the United States. And then, we should all agree on that. And then going forward, we should realize, okay, maybe we could debilitate Iran's capability to threaten us without having a new leader in there, again, without the regime change conversation. But we should all be on the same page about the threat Iran poses to Israel, our ally, our interests in the region, and our country.
And I think that's one of the key, again, there really are a couple of key points that need to be brought forward in any kind of a conversation about something so contentious as this. But one of the biggest is that if we can actually build from the ground up an argument for what we should or should not be doing in a region based on objective information on the ground, then we're not just arguing random points and jabs from the top down, and it actually becomes an effective conversation, particularly through, in a different theater, China. We can recognize that China is a geopolitical threat to the world. We can recognize that they are a direct adversary of the United States. That doesn't mean that anyone who criticizes China is like, we need boots on the ground in Beijing now, and we need what? Like, you don't have, there's a lot of arsenal options here.
Exactly.
That's why these conversations matter.
Exactly. And one more point on that is there are many differences between Iraq circa 2003 and Iran circa 2025. And I want to say, when we talk about Iran, it should have been clear up front, we're talking about the regime itself, not the people. And the Iranian people are 92 million strong, who have been held hostage by this regime for over 4 decades. And there's 10 million more in the diaspora. And they, more than America wants to see Iran freed of the regime, the Iranians want to see themselves freed of the regime. And, as someone who served in the IDF and worked for Israel's mission to the United Nations, I can say that the Jewish people could have no better friend than the Iranian people. So there's not a goal that we want to remove the regime to have something more of a neutered enemy for the United States. It's actually a new future for Iran could be a benefit for the United States, for Israel, and for the region.
I will say that probably the most effective thing that has come out of Netanyahu's mouth so far in this entire situation was the broadcast into Iran saying that at one point King Cyrus of Persia freed the Jews. And so then he indicated that the Israeli people, the Jewish people, would love to reciprocate. And I admire, again, I love I love that anyway, because of course to see Persia be Persia again would be wonderful. But to keep that kind of context in line, again, doesn't necessitate a big nation building scale. In fact, I'm seeing a far more similarities to Saddam's precarious situation in Kuwait in the 90s than I am Iraq in 02 and 03.
Yeah, in some ways. And Israel's operations are called Rising Lion. Now, it's kind of a double entendre, a twofold meaning behind there. One is lions, the symbol for the Jewish people, where we come from Judea, is a lion. You'll see that all across Jerusalem. And the second is the Pahlavi flag, or the flag rather before the revolution, is that of a lion. So it's a signal to the Iranian people, you can rise up. We're going to help you because we're going after the regime, because our enemy, our fight is the regime itself, not with the Iranian people. This is you mentioned Victoria and Rob earlier, and I'm really very grateful to be working with them. We're working on expanding the Abraham Accords with the administration and efforts we can do here at Heritage as well. And there's no reason to believe that not tomorrow and maybe not next year, but down the line, Iran should have normal, full relations with the state of Israel, which that would be, again, a benefit to the United States, because we could have common enemies and common interests that we would need to work to defeat and work towards explore at the same time. So the talk of regime change, people throw it around as kind of a knee-jerk reaction to say, don't go down the path that we did 25 years ago. And I understand that. But if you look at all beneath the hood, you realize the context and situations are sufficiently different, and the aims thus stated so far by the leaders in Israel and here have nothing to do with regime change just yet.
Absolutely. And again, those kind of statements are useful as a reminder really at any time to kind of take a step back. I'm letting him cook. I'm let President Trump, he's in the kitchen. I'm just in my humble opinion, I'm going to let the man cook. That all said, Daniel Flesch over from Heritage, thank you very much for taking a few minutes to join us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Yeah, you thought I wasn't, I was going to cut to commercial. Well, sort of. Here's the catch. If you or a loved one are turning 65 soon, you're going to want to hear about how our partner, Chapter Medicare, is saving people thousands of dollars. Unfortunately, being the government boondoggle, and a required boondoggle at that it is, Medicare enrollment is a maze of misinformation. And the victims are everyday Americans, parents and grandparents, including those of Chapter's co-founders. That's why they vowed to go the extra mile to do right by their customers. Chapter's advisors listen carefully. They compare every plan and help you maximize your savings. People are relieved when they talk to Chapter, even making a typically annoying process easy and enjoyable. You're not just funneled into whatever one insurance company has funded. Working with Chapter is simple. It helps save a ton of money and saves you days and days of research. These guys are not going to push you into buying a plan you don't want, and their support is completely free. So if you or a loved one turning 65 soon, call them up. You won't regret it. In fact, most people only regret not calling Chapter first. Call 415-787-4074, numbers on the screen, or visit askchapter.org/Tony. That's askchapter.org/Tony. All right, now, very, very briefly here, right at the end, I want to ask you, what is the worst possible argument for illegal immigration? What is it? If you could think of the stupidest thing you could come up with to be in favor of having more illegal immigrants in the United States, what would it be? If you were guessing slave labor is good, you're correct. And yet here we are in the middle of the ICE immigration success from the Trump administration, the failure of the Los Angeles riots, the failure of the No King's Day protests. now into, again, an approval surge on immigration for President Trump and his administration. So what has the left done? Well, you still have people like Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles getting out in front of the country and saying, no, please don't take them. Who's going to pick the cotton?
I don't think the president understands that there are entire sectors of our economy that could not function without immigrant labor.
Why? What labor? What labor specifically?
We have 4,000 independent businesses in the fashion district.
Ah, yes. What would the fashion district? Oh, no. I'm sorry. I am confused about this one. Nick, do you know, are illegal immigrants designing fashion in the fashion industry? Coco Chanel.
And the fashion district, as described by the owners and operators, is a ghost town.
Ah, yes. Yeah, that's it. I love the Freudian slip. Entire sectors of our economy. Think about the crop pickers and the hospital cleaners and who's mowing our lawns. Other influencers on the left side of the aisle are a little more honest about this one.
Hey, Viv, these mass deportations are going to help out real Americans, right?
I'm going to stop you right there. First off, if watching families being ripped apart does not appeal to your humanity, let me try and appeal to you financially.
Again, this is the first administration which is not ripping families apart to deport them. To quote Tom Homan, they can be deported together. Not ripping families apart. They're being moved as a unit. So, but anyway, appeal to us financially, school marm.
Because these mass ICE deportations are bad for the economy. So while undocumented immigrants actually make up a really small portion of the overall workforce.
If you're going to start by suggesting that a group, we see this with the NPR and the PBS. Well, actually, NPR and PBS really only take a small portion of tax dollars. It's like 1% to 3% of the operating budget. If that is the beginning of your argument, then the rest of your argument is irrelevant. Because in this case, if illegal immigrants are such a small portion of the workforce, why are they crucial to the workforce? You can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, it's not even a big deal anyway, and then say, but it's also crucial for the survival of the economy.
They are overrepresented in jobs that you do not want. Things that have little benefits, long hours, backbreaking work with no pay.
Okay, so let's talk about that list just a little bit here that have little benefits,
long hours, backbreaking work,
with
no pay.
With no pay. Now, she later when she's putting her little captions on, she says little pay. I'm confused. Why do you want the group in this country illegally to be taken advantage of like this? Do you know why they have little benefits, long hours, backbreaking work, and little pay on the places that hire illegal immigrants? Because they're not in the system. It is against federal law to have someone work a certain number of hours and not provide them benefits. It is against the law to make someone work long hours without any respite at all. It is against the law to put people in certain dangerous positions in work. Have you ever heard of OSHA? The Occupational Safety and Health and Hazard Organization? Get out of here. Little to no pay. Again, why are they being paid little to nothing? Because there are minimum wage laws in the United States. You are making the case for slave labor. Slave labor. The reason that iPhones are so cheap is not because of automation. The reason iPhones are so cheap is because Apple holds people at gunpoint in gross empty warehouses with bars on the windows to keep people from committing suicide and jumping all the way down to the ground to make the cheap iPhone. Slave labor is, in fact, an economic tool of totalitarianism and corrupt corporatism. It has been since it was outlawed in the United States. Again, the founding fathers did not want the United States to be subsistent on slavery because it is an economic dead end. It doesn't produce innovation. It isn't good for an economy. Thomas Jefferson said that slavery would eventually end because no economy could survive on it.
For example, about 42% of the agricultural workforce, 23% of the construction workforce are undocumented. And let's be real, these are self-reported numbers, so those are probably light. But
That's not an argument you want to make. You don't want to say, well, there's such a small portion of the economy, and then say, well, the numbers we have are probably really underreported. There's probably like tens of millions, hundreds of millions illegals in the country working.
Short of it all is that the food that you eat and the home that you live in was probably brought to you by someone who is an immigrant.
That is not, in fact, the case. That is not, in fact, the case. The majority of food in your house is not picked by illegal immigrants. That is a false notion that Democrats are currently pushing to make you think you are somehow subsistent on these nonsensical arguments of illegal immigrants are desperately necessary for the economy. It's not true. The majority of crops in the United States are not picked by illegal immigrants. You'd notice. There are some specialty vegetables and fruits in some regions of the Southwest in which there are a majority of illegal immigrants working on farms. There are also, however, a lot of legal immigrants working on these farms. The vast majority of crops in the United States are picked via automation and the hard work and the sweat and toil of American farmers and equipment they have spent millions of dollars on over decades. It is an insult to American farmers to pretend that we all die and go hungry if we don't allow Juan into the country illegally with his past criminal convictions so he can work on the farm. And by the way, a lot of these construction agencies that are hiring illegals to set up all of these clapboard houses they're passing off as $250,000, $260,000 suburban homes that are littering every town in the United States and suburbs we don't need. Well, it just so turns out that building inspectors have entire Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube pages dedicated to the shoddy, crappy work of illegal immigrants putting things together. It is mostly companies suspected of hiring illegal immigrants, not legal immigrants in this country, that are putting up some of the shoddiest, most garbage We're going to do a segment on that. We're going to compile some of the worst companies that are doing the worst, shoddiest work, putting up new builds that are horrible in this country. And then we're going to compare that to the companies that are hiring legal American labor. I'm sorry, the slave labor argument is garbage. Because conscript fever, forcing someone to do something, means that you get a worse product. No one who's ever been a slave or conscripted into something is like, oh, I'm going to do the best job ever because, gee, golly willikers, this is why communism does not work. Forced compliance is not, in fact, a means to human success. It never has been, and it never will be. It's just brain dead retardedness. Again, come to the United States so that instead of working in a land of opportunity, you can work the same slave labor job that you were probably working in your home country. Yeah, exactly. Pure nonsense. All right, so before I get called out by the Southern Poverty Law Center, actually, I would love to be on the SPLC's heat map. That would be a treat from on high. We're going to wrap things up for this evening. It's been a blast to be with you. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Take care.